Captain Jake Morrison wiped the sweat from his forehead as he stared at the broken display screens on the bridge of the UES Liberty. Half the lights were flickering, and the air recycling system made strange humming noises that worried everyone on board. This was humanity's first ship built for deep space travel, but it looked more like a flying junkyard than a proper starship. The Liberty had taken 3 years to build using everything Earth could spare. The hull was made from recycled steel and aluminum. The engines were fusion reactors that other alien races had probably thrown away centuries ago, but it was all humanity had, and Jake was proud to command it. His crew of 200 men and women had volunteered for this mission knowing they might never see Earth again. They were explorers, not soldiers. Their job was simple: find other intelligent life in the galaxy and make friends. Nobody expected them to run into trouble this far from home. Lieutenant Amy Chen sat at the communications station, her fingers dancing over the controls as she tried to boost their long-range sensors. She was young, maybe 25, with black hair tied back in a regulation ponytail. Amy had learned 6 different alien languages during training, hoping to make first contact easier when they found someone to talk to. "Captain, I'm picking up something big on the sensors," Amy said, her voice tight with concern. "Really big." Jake walked over to look at her screen. The display showed dozens of red dots arranged in perfect formation. Each dot was massive, easily 10 times the size of the Liberty. Jake had never seen ships that large, not even in the wildest dreams of Earth's engineers. "How many ships are we looking at?" Jake asked. Amy checked her readings twice before answering. "At least 300, sir, maybe more. They're all identical, like they came from the same factory." Chief Engineer Danny Rodriguez looked up from his repair work on the main console. Danny was a short, stocky man with grease stains on his uniform and a talent for keeping broken machines running. He had been working non-stop since their jump drive malfunctioned 3 days ago. "Captain, if those ships are as big as the sensors say, they could probably blow us apart without even trying," Danny said. "Our weapons are just small railguns compared to what they might have." Jake nodded. He knew the Liberty was no match for even one advanced alien warship, let alone hundreds. But running away wasn't an option. Their jump drive was still broken and they barely had enough fuel to reach the nearest star system. "Amy, can you pick up any of their communications?" Jake asked. Amy adjusted her controls and put the alien transmissions through the ship's speakers. Strange clicking and buzzing sounds filled the bridge. None of it sounded like any language humans had ever heard. "I'm running it through the translation computer," Amy said. "It might take a few minutes to find patterns." While they waited, Jake looked around at his crew. Lieutenant Lisa Parker stood at the weapons station, even though their guns were practically useless. Lisa was a former military officer who had joined the mission because she wanted to see the stars. She kept her blonde hair cut short and her uniform perfectly pressed, even when everything else on the ship was falling apart. Ensign Kevin Wright monitored the ship's power systems from his station near the back of the bridge. Kevin was barely 21, fresh out of the academy and excited about every part of their journey. He had volunteered to work double shifts just to learn more about how the ship operated. Dr. Helen Brooks, the ship's head scientist, stood near the main display studying the alien fleet formation. Helen was in her 40s with gray hair and sharp eyes that missed nothing. She had spent her whole career studying the possibility of alien life, and now she was seeing more of it than she had ever imagined. "Captain, I've got partial translation," Amy announced. "They're talking about us. They call us something that translates to primitive insects or crawling things." Jake felt his jaw tighten. Being insulted by aliens wasn't exactly how he had planned to make first contact. "What else are they saying?" he asked. Amy listened for another minute, her face growing pale. "They're deciding whether to destroy us immediately or capture us for study. One of them is saying we're not worth the effort." Danny looked up from his repairs. "Well, that's encouraging. They think we're so pathetic they might not bother killing us." Jake walked to the center of the bridge and looked at the main screen, showing the alien fleet. The ships were beautiful in a terrifying way. They looked like they were made of crystal and metal, with smooth curves that seemed to flow like water. Each ship glowed with internal light that pulsed like a heartbeat. "Dr. Brooks, what do you make of their technology?" Jake asked. Helen studied the sensor readings carefully. It's far beyond anything we have, Captain. Those ships are probably powered by something we don't even understand yet. Their weapons could turn us into dust before we knew what hit us. But, Jake said, hearing the uncertainty in her voice. But they're moving in perfect formation, Helen continued. Every ship is exactly the same distance from the others. They're flying like they're in a parade, not like they expect a fight. Lisa looked up from her weapons console. That makes sense if they've never met anyone who could challenge them. Why would they bother with tactics if every enemy surrenders immediately? Jake thought about this. Earth's military history was full of powerful armies that had been defeated by smaller, more flexible forces. Maybe these aliens had the same weakness. Amy, are they still talking about us? Jake asked. Yes, sir. One of them just said they're sending a single ship to deal with us. They're calling it a cleanup operation. Jake watched as one of the red dots separated from the main fleet and began moving toward them. Even one of their ships was probably enough to destroy the Liberty without breaking a sweat. How long until it reaches us? Jake asked. Kevin checked his instruments. About 20 minutes at their current speed, Captain. Jake looked around at his crew. They were scared, but they weren't giving up. Amy continued monitoring communications. Lisa was checking their weapons even though they were outgunned 1,000 to 1. Danny kept working on the engines. Kevin watched his power readings. Helen studied every piece of data they could gather about the approaching ship. Captain, Amy said quietly, I'm picking up more transmissions from other parts of the galaxy. These aren't the only alien ships out here. There are hundreds of different species and they're all talking about the same thing. What's that? Jake asked. They're all afraid of these crystal ships. Every single one of them. Some of the messages are distress calls from planets under attack. Others are surrender broadcasts, but they're all terrified of whoever is in those ships. Jake realized they had stumbled into something much bigger than a first contact situation. This wasn't just one alien race they had encountered. This was an empire that controlled large parts of the galaxy, and they ruled through fear. Single enemy ship was getting closer. Soon they would find out just how powerful these aliens really were. Jake knew the Liberty probably wouldn't survive the next hour, but he was determined to make their last stand count for something. Maybe Earth would never know what happened to them. Maybe no one would ever hear their story. But Jake Morrison and his crew weren't going to surrender without a fight, even if that fight seemed completely hopeless. The enemy ship appeared on their visual screens, growing larger every second. It was time to find out what humans could do when they had nothing left to lose. Commander Zixathara stood on the bridge of his destroyer ship, the Void Piercer, watching the primitive vessel grow larger on his screens. In his 300 years of service to the Catherian Empire, he had never seen such a crude piece of technology trying to pass itself off as a starship. The human vessel looked like someone had welded together pieces of scrap metal and hoped for the best. Its hull was covered in rough patches and uneven seams. The engine emissions were so dirty they left a visible trail in space. Zixthara's sensors showed that the ship was barely holding together. His crew of 50 Catherians moved silently around the crystal bridge, their tall, thin bodies glowing with the same internal light as their ship. They communicated through low humming sounds that vibrated through the crystalline walls. None of them showed any concern about the approaching battle. This would be over in seconds. Weapons officer, Zixthara hummed in his native language. Prepare a single plasma burst, low power. We don't want to vaporize them completely. The science division might want to study the wreckage. Back on the Liberty, Captain Jake Morrison watched the alien destroyer approach. It was beautiful and terrifying at the same time. The ship seemed to be carved from a single piece of glowing crystal, with weapon ports that pulsed with deadly energy. Lisa, what's our weapon status? Jake asked. Lieutenant Lisa Parker checked her console and shook her head. Not good, Captain. We've got one railgun with maybe 10 shots left before the power coupling burns out. Our missile tubes are empty, and the laser batteries are still offline from the jump drive malfunction. Chief Engineer Danny Rodriguez looked up from where he was lying under a control panel, tools scattered around him. Captain, I've been trying to fix the power system for 3 days. The quantum drive overload fried half our circuits. We're running on backup power, and that won't last much longer. Jake walked over to the tactical display where Dr. Helen Brooks was studying the enemy ship. Helen, what can you tell me about their approach? Dr. Brooks pointed at the screen. They're coming straight at us, no evasive maneuvers at all. Their weapons are charged, but they're not even bothering to lock onto us yet. It's like they're not expecting us to fight back. Maybe they've never had to fight anyone before, Jake said. Every other race probably surrendered the moment they saw ships like that. Ensign Kevin Wright called out from his station. Captain, they're trying to communicate with us. It's coming through on multiple frequencies. Put it through the translator, Jake ordered. Amy Chen worked quickly at her console. A few seconds later, a cold, mechanical voice filled the bridge. Primitive vessel, you have entered Catherian space without permission. You will shut down your engines and prepare to be destroyed. Resistance is futile. Your technology is inferior. Your species is irrelevant. Jake felt anger rise in his chest. These aliens had been terrorizing the galaxy for who knows how long, and now they were treating humans like insects to be stepped on. Amy, open a channel, Jake said. Channel open, Captain. Jake stepped forward and spoke clearly. This is Captain Jake Morrison of the Earthship Liberty. We came here in peace looking for friends among the stars, but we won't surrender to bullies no matter how big their ships are. There was silence for a moment. Then the alien voice returned, sounding almost amused. You choose to resist? Your small weapon cannot penetrate our shields. Your primitive armor cannot stop our plasma cannons. This is your final warning. Jake looked around at his crew. They were all watching him, waiting for orders. None of them looked ready to give up, even though they knew they were probably about to die. Danny, how much power can you give me for one shot? Jake asked. Danny slid out from under the console, his face covered in grease and sweat. If I reroute everything from life support, shields, and communications, I might be able to give you full power to the railgun for exactly one shot. After that, we'll be floating dead in space. Do it, Jake ordered. Captain, Lisa said, even at full power, a kinetic round probably won't get through their energy shields. Dr. Brooks looked up from her instruments. Actually, it might. Their shields are designed to stop energy weapons like plasma and lasers, but a solid projectile moving at near light speed, they might not be expecting that. Jake walked to the weapons console and put his hand on Lisa's shoulder. What kind of round do we have loaded? Tungsten penetrator rod, sir. Dense metal, designed to punch through armor. It's not fancy, but it hits hard. The alien ship was getting closer. Jake could see details on its crystal hull now. Weapon ports were opening along its sides, revealing the glowing energy weapons inside. Danny, how's that power transfer coming? Jake called out. Almost there, Captain. Just a few more seconds. Danny's hands flew over his controls, rerouting, power from every system they could spare. The lights on the bridge dimmed as energy flowed to the railgun. Jake watched the alien ship approach. It was moving in a perfectly straight line, making no attempt to dodge or weave. The commander probably thought the Liberty was already defeated. Captain, Kevin reported, I'm reading massive energy buildup in their weapons. They're about to fire. Lisa, do you have a target lock? Jake asked. Yes, sir. Right where Dr. Brooks says their reactor should be based on their energy signatures. Jake took a deep breath. This was it. One shot to save his crew and maybe send a message to the galaxy that humans wouldn't go quietly. Fire, he ordered. The Liberty shuddered as the railgun discharged. A tungsten rod the size of a baseball shot out of the ship at incredible speed, moving so fast it was invisible to the naked eye. Commander Zix Thera was about to give the order to fire when his sensors detected something unexpected. The primitive ship had launched a projectile, but it wasn't energy-based. His computer systems had never encountered a solid object moving at such velocity. The tungsten rod hit the Void Piercer's shields and passed right through them as if they weren't there. Catherian energy shields were perfect for stopping plasma, bolts and particle beams, but they had no effect on solid matter. The rod punched through the crystal hull, tore through 3 decks, and struck the ship's reactor core. The ancient safety systems that had protected Cytherian ships for millennia had never been designed to handle kinetic impacts. Zixathera had just enough time to realize what was happening before his ship exploded in a brilliant flash of light. The Liberty. Jake and his crew watched in amazement as the massive alien destroyer simply vanished in a ball of fire. The explosion was so bright it temporarily blinded their sensors. "Did we just—" Kevin started to say. "We killed it," Lisa whispered. "We actually killed it." Danny stared at his instruments in disbelief. "Captain, that ship was 50 times our size. It had technology we can't even understand. How did one tungsten rod destroy it?" Dr. Brooks was already studying the sensor data from the explosion. "They've been using the same shield technology for so long, they forgot how to defend against simple kinetic weapons. It's like bringing a sword to a gunfight, except we were the ones with the sword." Jake felt a mix of relief and worry. They had won this battle, but the main alien fleet was still out there, and now they would be very angry. "Amy, are you picking up any communications from the main fleet?" Jake asked. Amy listened to her headphones for a moment, her face growing pale. "Yes, sir. They're not happy. I'm hearing words that definitely sound like swearing, even through the translator. And Captain, they're all moving toward us now. All 300 ships." Jake looked at the tactical display. The entire alien fleet was breaking formation and heading their way. Their simple trick would only work once. The next battle would be much harder to win. Admiral Zethkar stood in the command center of his massive flagship, staring at the tactical display in complete shock. For the first time in his 800 years of life, he had watched a Cytherian warship die in battle. The impossible had just happened, and he couldn't understand how. The flagship's bridge was a cathedral of living crystal, with walls that pulsed with soft blue light. Hundreds of Cytherian officers worked at stations that grew from the floor, like crystalline trees. The air hummed with their voices as they tried to make sense of what they had witnessed. "Analysis officer," Zethkar commanded, "explain to me how a primitive kinetic weapon destroyed the Void Piercer." The young officer's internal light flickered nervously. "Admiral, our shields have always been designed to stop energy weapons, plasma, lasers, particle beams. But this solid projectile passed through our defensive screens like they weren't there." Zethkar felt something he hadn't experienced in centuries: uncertainty. The Cytherian Empire had conquered the galaxy by being superior in every way. Their technology was advanced beyond anything other species could imagine. Their ships were unstoppable. Their victory was always certain. But this tiny human vessel had just proven that superiority could be beaten by something much simpler: thinking differently. "Communications officer," Zethkar ordered. "Send orders to all ships. We will surround the human vessel and destroy it with overwhelming firepower. I want 300 plasma cannons firing at once. Nothing can survive that." As the Cytherian fleet began to move, something unexpected happened. Ships began appearing from empty space all around them. Not Cytherian ships, but vessels belonging to dozens of different species. Some were sleek and fast, others were bulky cargo haulers converted for combat. All of them had one thing in common: they had been hiding, waiting for something to change. "Captain." Nexara stood on the bridge of her converted merchant ship, the Starwind Dancer. She was a Vegan, with blue-green skin and large black eyes that had seen too much suffering. For 20 years, she had been forced to carry cargo for the Cytherian Empire, watching as they destroyed her homeworld and enslaved her people. But today she had seen something impossible on her long-range sensors. A single small ship had killed a Cytherian destroyer. After decades of hopelessness, someone had finally proven that the Empire could bleed. "Helm, take us closer to that human ship," Nexara ordered. "If they can kill Cytherians, I want to know how they did it." Similar conversations were happening on dozens of other ships throughout the system. Word was spreading through hidden communication, networks that rebels and outcasts had been using for years. The impossible had happened, and everyone wanted to see it for themselves. On the Liberty, Chief Engineer Danny Rodriguez was frantically trying to restore their systems. The single shot from their railgun had drained almost all their power. Life Support was failing, communications were down, and their engines were barely working. "Captain?" Danny called out. "I've got some power back, but not much. Maybe enough for one more shot, but then we're really done for." Captain Jake Morrison looked at the tactical display and felt his heart sink. The entire alien fleet was moving toward them, and there was nowhere to run. But something else was showing up on their sensors too. "Amy, are you getting any communications from those new ships?" Jake asked. Lieutenant Amy Chen worked at her station, trying to boost their receivers with what little power they had. "Yes, sir. Multiple frequencies, different languages. The computer is trying to translate them all." Dr. Helen Brooks was studying the sensor readings of the approaching ships. "Captain, these aren't Catherian vessels. They're from at least a dozen different species, and they're not attacking us." Jake watched as more and more ships appeared on their screens. "How many are we looking at?" Ensign Kevin Wright checked his instruments. "Over 100 now, sir, and more are still arriving." Amy suddenly looked up from her console, her eyes wide with surprise. "Captain, I'm getting a transmission. It's in broken English." "Put it through," Jake ordered. A voice filled the bridge, speaking with a thick accent that the translator was struggling to process. "Human ship, this is Captain Nexera of the free merchant vessel Starwind Dancer. You have done something we thought impossible. You have killed the Crystal Devils. We want to help you kill more of them." Jake looked around at his crew in amazement. "Open a channel, Amy. This is Captain Morrison of the Earth ship Liberty. We're not soldiers, we're explorers. We didn't come here to start a war." Nexara's voice came back immediately. "Captain Morrison, the war has been going on for thousands of years. The Crystal Devils have been crushing every species they meet. But today you showed us they can die. We have been waiting our whole lives for this moment." More voices joined the communication channel. A rough-sounding captain who identified himself as Commander Jax of the Mining Consortium, a soft-spoken female voice from Dr. Yila of the medical refugee ship Mercy's Hope. Each new voice represented another species that had been crushed under the Catherian Empire's boot. Lieutenant Lisa Parker was monitoring the approaching Catherian. "Sir, Captain, the alien warships will be in firing range in 10 minutes. We need to do something fast." Jake made a decision that would change the course of galactic history. "Amy, broadcast to all the rebel ships. Tell them we're willing to share everything we know about fighting the Catherians, but we need to work together." Over the next few minutes, the communication channels filled with excited chatter as rebel captains shared information about Catherian weaknesses they had observed over the years. Dr. Brooks worked with alien scientists to analyze the shield frequencies. Danny coordinated with other engineers to find ways to modify their weapons. The most important discovery came from an old Altarian captain named Vexmore, whose people had been fighting a losing guerrilla war against the Empire for 50 years. He had noticed that Catherian shields had a specific frequency they used to deflect energy weapons. "If we can coordinate our attacks," Vexmore explained through the translator, "and hit that exact frequency with multiple weapons at the same time, we might be able to overload their defensive systems." Dr. Brooks was already running calculations. It could work. The resonance cascade would disrupt their entire shield matrix. But we would need perfect timing. Jake looked at the growing rebel fleet surrounding the Liberty. These weren't professional soldiers or advanced warships. They were farmers, merchants, refugees, and outcasts who had been hiding in the shadows for years. But they had something the Catherians had never faced before. Nothing left to lose. "Amy, patch me through to all rebel ships," Jake ordered. When the channel was open, Jake spoke to the mixed fleet of freedom fighters. "This is Captain Morrison. I won't lie to you. Most of us are probably going to die in the next few minutes. The Catherians have better ships, better weapons, and more experience than we do. But they have one weakness we can exploit. They've never had to fight anyone who refused to give up." Captain Nexara's voice came over the channel first. "Captain Morrison, my people have been slaves for 20 years. Today we choose to be free." Commander Jax's rough voice followed. "The Crystal Devils destroyed my homeworld. Time for some payback." One by one, the rebel captains declared their intention to fight. Jake listened to their voices and realized that something unprecedented was happening. For the first time in Cytherian history, their enemies were uniting instead of surrendering. The Cytherian fleet was almost in range now. Admiral Zethkar expected to find one damaged human ship waiting to be destroyed. Instead, he found an entire rebel armada that had spent decades learning how to hate his empire. The real battle was about to begin. Admiral Zethkar stared at his tactical display in growing disbelief. Where he had expected to find one crippled human ship, there were now over 200 rebel vessels arranged in a loose defensive formation. Ships he recognized from intelligence. Reports as pirates, smugglers, and freedom fighters had somehow united under the command of the primitive humans. The rebel fleet was a mess of different technologies and designs. Some ships were sleek racing vessels converted for combat. Others were massive cargo haulers with weapons welded to their hulls. A few were military ships from fallen civilizations, kept running with spare parts and hope. None of them should have been a threat to his advanced fleet. But Zethkar had been alive long enough to remember the early days of the Empire, when they had faced organized resistance. He knew that desperate enemies could be the most dangerous kind. "Battle stations," he commanded. "All ships maintain formation. We will demonstrate the price of defying the Empire." Captain Jake Morrison stood on the damaged bridge of the Liberty, coordinating the strangest military operation in human history. His communications officer, Amy Chen, had jury-rigged their systems to handle dozens of different alien communication frequencies at once. "Captain Nexara, take your fast ships around the left flank," Jake ordered. "Commander Jax, bring your heavy haulers up the middle. Dr. Yilla, keep your medical ships back but ready to help wounded vessels." The plan was simple, but dangerous. The rebel ships would attack in waves, hitting the Cytherian shields at the exact frequency Dr. Brooks had calculated. If they could time it perfectly, the resonance cascade would overload the enemy's defensive systems. Lieutenant Lisa Parker was coordinating weapons targeting from her station. "Captain, we're getting reports from all rebel ships. They've modified their weapons to match our frequency calculations. It's not pretty, but it should work." Chief Engineer Danny Rodriguez looked up from his repairs. "Captain, I've managed to restore enough power for 3 more railgun shots. After that, we're running on fumes." Jake nodded. The Liberty would have to make every shot count. The Cytherian fleet opened fire first. Hundreds of plasma cannons lit up space with deadly energy. Beams. The rebel ships scattered like startled fish, using every trick they had learned during years of running from the Empire. Captain Nexara threw her ship into a spinning dive, barely avoiding a plasma bolt that would have vaporized her hull. "All ships execute Pattern 7, she called over the communication channel. "Make them work for every shot." The rebels had spent decades learning how to survive against superior firepower. They used asteroid fields for cover, created false sensor readings with electronic jamming, and coordinated their movements in ways the Cytherians had never seen before. Commander Jax brought his converted mining ship through a cluster of space debris, his heavy armor taking hits that would have destroyed smaller vessels. "Crystal Devils always fight the same way," he growled over the radio. "Time to show them something new." The first coordinated rebel attack came from 12 different ships, all firing at the same Cytherian cruiser at the exact same moment. The mixed barrage of plasma bolts, kinetic rounds, and energy beams hit the enemy shields at precisely the frequency Dr. Brooks had calculated. The cruiser's defensive screens flickered and failed. For the first time in 3,000 years, Cytherian armor was taking direct hits. The ship's crystal hull cracked under the impacts, and secondary explosions began tearing through its internal systems. Admiral Zethkar watched in horror as his cruiser began to break apart. "Impossible," he whispered. "Our shields cannot fail." But they were failing, all across the battlefield. Rebel ships that had spent years running from Cytherian patrols were suddenly attacking with coordinated precision. Their weapons were crude, and their ships were patched together, but they were fighting with something the Empire had forgotten existed: hope. Dr. Helen Brooks was analyzing the battle data from the Liberty's sensors. "Captain, it's working better than we expected. The resonance cascade is creating feedback loops in their shield generators. Once the frequency match is established, Their entire defensive grid becomes unstable. Jake watched as more Cytherian ships began taking damage, but the rebels were paying a heavy price too. Several of the smaller vessels had been destroyed by return fire, and others were badly damaged. "Amy, get me a channel to all rebel ships," Jake ordered. When the communication line was open, Jake spoke to the mixed fleet of freedom fighters. "All ships, this is Morrison. I know we're taking losses, but we're proving something important today. These crystal ships can be beaten. Every hit we land, every shield we drop, sends a message across the galaxy that the Empire is not invincible." Captain Nixara's voice came back over the channel. "Captain Morrison, my sensors show 20 Cytherian ships with failed shields. We are making them bleed like they made us bleed." The battle raged for hours. The Cytherians had superior technology and more ships, but they were fighting an enemy unlike any they had faced before. The rebels didn't fight in formation. They didn't follow standard tactics. They adapted and improvised, turning their weakness into strength. Lieutenant Lisa Parker coordinated the Liberty's 3 remaining railgun shots, each one carefully aimed at Cytherian ships whose shields had been weakened by coordinated rebel attacks. All 3 shots found their targets, punching through crystal hulls and causing massive internal damage. But the most important moment came when old Captain Vexmore, the Altarian guerrilla fighter, made a suicide run at Admiral Zethkar's flagship. His ship was already dying, engines failing, and hull breached in a dozen places. "For my people," Vexmore transmitted as he aimed his ship at the massive Cytherian command vessel. "For all the worlds you have destroyed." The Altarian ship struck the flagship's weakened shields and exploded, creating a resonance cascade that rippled through the entire Cytherian formation. Shield generators began failing on dozens of ships as the cascade effect spread from vessel to vessel. Admiral Zethkar felt his flagship shudder under the impact. Emergency lights flashed throughout the bridge as his officers struggled to restore their defensive systems. For the first time in his long life, he was afraid. "Admiral," his tactical officer reported, "we have lost 47 ships, hull breaches on 60 more. The rebels are coordinating their attacks in ways our computers cannot predict." Zethkar looked at the tactical display and saw something that chilled him to his core. The rebel fleet, despite taking heavy losses, was still fighting. More ships were arriving every few minutes as word of the battle spread through hidden communication networks. Jake Morrison stood on his damaged bridge, watching the impossible battle unfold around him. The Liberty was barely holding together, with life support failing and most systems offline. But they had done something no one thought possible. They had bloodied the invincible Cytherian Empire. "Captain," Amy reported, "I'm picking up transmissions from across the galaxy. Word of the battle is spreading. Rebel cells on a dozen worlds are talking about uprising." Dr. Brooks looked up from her sensor readings. "Captain, the Cytherian fleet is beginning to withdraw. They're pulling back to regroup." Jake couldn't believe what he was hearing. The mighty Empire, rulers of the galaxy for 3 millennia, were retreating from a ragtag fleet of rebels and 1 damaged human ship. But as he watched the crystal ships begin their withdrawal, Jake knew this was only the beginning. The rebels had proven the Empire could be hurt, but Zethkar would return with reinforcements. The real war was just starting. The question now was whether the spark they had lit today would spread fast enough to give the galaxy a fighting chance. 3 days after the battle, Captain Jake Morrison sat in the damaged captain's chair of the Liberty, looking out at the strangest sight he had ever seen. Over 500 ships from dozens of different species were floating in space around his broken vessel. They had come from all corners of the galaxy, drawn by stories of the impossible victory. Chief Engineer Danny Rodriguez had somehow managed to restore life support and basic communications, but the Liberty was still barely functional. The ship that had started this revolution was held together by spare parts, hope, and Danny's stubborn refusal to let anything stay broken for long. "Captain," Lieutenant Amy Chen called from her communication station, "we're getting reports from rebel cells across 20 star systems. Uprisings have started on Altair 7, the vegan colonies, and the mining worlds of the Outer Rim." Jake felt a mix of pride and worry. They had wanted to explore the galaxy and make friends. Instead, they had started the biggest war in galactic history. Dr. Helen Brooks was analyzing intelligence reports from across the rebel network. Captain, the Catherian Empire is in chaos. Admiral Zethkar has been stripped of his command for losing the battle. They're pulling ships back from Frontier, worlds to protect their core systems. Lieutenant Lisa Parker looked up from her weapons console. Sir, that means thousands of planets that were under Catherian occupation are suddenly free. The Empire can't be everywhere at once anymore. On the bridge of his new flagship, Admiral Zethkar stood before the High Council of the Catherian Empire. The crystal beings that ruled the galaxy were ancient beyond human understanding, their bodies glowing with cold, angry light. Explain to us, the first council member hummed in harmonics that made the ship's walls vibrate, how a primitive species with inferior technology has inspired half the galaxy to rebel against us. Zethkar kept his head bowed respectfully, but inside he was burning with shame and rage. Honored Council, the humans fight differently than any species we have encountered. They do not follow standard military doctrine. They adapt their tactics constantly. Most dangerous of all, they treat other species as equals rather than subjects. The second council member's voice was like breaking glass. You are telling us that our 3,000-year reign is threatened by beings who share their knowledge freely? Yes, honored council. The humans have united our enemies in ways we never thought possible. They have shown the galaxy that we can be defeated. The third council member was silent for a long moment before speaking. Then they must be eliminated completely. Prepare the extinction fleet. We will destroy their homeworld and every ship that carries their influence. Zethkar felt his internal light flicker with uncertainty. The extinction fleet had not been used for over 1,000 years. It was designed to sterilize entire star systems, leaving nothing alive. Honored Council, such action would reveal our true nature to the galaxy. Many species still believe we are benevolent rulers. The time for pretense is over, the first council member replied. The humans have forced our hand. We will show the galaxy what happens to those who defy the Empire. Back on the Liberty, Jake was meeting with rebel leaders from across the known galaxy. The main conference room was packed with beings he was still learning to recognize. Captain Nexara sat next to Commander Jax, while Dr. Yila worked with other medical officers to coordinate aid for wounded ships. Friends, Jake began, still amazed that he was addressing representatives of dozens of worlds. We've proven that the Catherian Empire can be beaten in battle, but this is only the beginning. They'll come back stronger and they'll be angry. Captain Nexara spoke first. Captain Morrison, my people have been monitoring Catherian communications. They are mobilizing something called the Extinction Fleet. Our intelligence suggests it is designed to destroy entire solar systems. A cold silence fell over the room. Jake felt his stomach drop. The Liberty's mission had been to explore space and make peaceful contact. Now Earth itself was in danger because of what they had done. Commander Jax's rough voice cut through the silence. They're planning to hit Earth first, aren't they? Make an example of the humans. Dr. Helen Brooks was rapidly calculating hyperspace, travel times on her portable computer. If they launch from the core worlds, they could reach Earth in 2 weeks. Our fastest ships couldn't get there in time to warn them. Jake stood up, his decision already made. Then we don't warn them. We stop the extinction fleet before it reaches Earth. The room erupted in concerned voices. Several rebel captains pointed out that the extinction fleet would be the most heavily defended formation in Catherian history. Others argued that their mixed rebel ships couldn't possibly stand against such overwhelming force. Amy Chen looked up from her communication equipment. Captain, I'm receiving a transmission from Earth. It's Admiral Patricia Stone of the Earth Defense Force. Jake's eyes widened. Admiral Stone had been his commanding officer when he left Earth. Put it through, Amy. The familiar voice of Admiral Stone filled the room, though the signal was weak and full of static. Jake, we've been monitoring your situation through the deep space communication relays. Earth Command knows what you've accomplished out there. Admiral, Jake replied. The Catherians are sending a fleet to destroy Earth. We started this war, and now our home is paying the price. Admiral Stone's voice was calm and steady. Captain Morrison, you didn't start this war. You revealed a war that was already happening. The Catherian Empire has been conquering and enslaving species for thousands of years. You just gave the galaxy a reason to fight back. Dr. Yila, the soft-spoken medical officer, spoke up. Admiral Stone, the rebel fleet will intercept the extinction fleet before it reaches your world. We cannot allow Earth to be destroyed for showing us how to be free. Negative, Admiral Stone replied firmly. Earth is not defenseless. We've been building ships based on the technical data you've been sending. The railgun design that works so well against Catherian shields is already in production. When they arrive, we'll be ready for them. Jake felt a surge of pride in his home world. Earth might not have the most advanced technology in the galaxy, but humans had something else. The refusal to give up when things looked impossible. Captain Nexara stood up from her chair. Then we fight them together. The rebel fleet will meet the extinction fleet halfway to Earth. We will show the Empire that their reign of terror is over. Over the next week, the largest military operation in galactic history began to take shape. Ships from hundreds of worlds converged on the coordinates where they would intercept the Catherian extinction fleet. The rebels shared technology, tactics, and supplies in ways that had never been seen before. Jake Morrison found himself appointed as overall commander of the rebel forces, not because he was the most experienced military leader, but because he was the one who had started it all. The human captain who had refused to surrender when surrender seemed like the only option. As the Liberty limped through hyperspace toward the final battle, Jake recorded what he thought might be his last log entry. This is Captain Jake Morrison of the Earthship Liberty. We came to the stars looking for friends and found a galaxy full of slaves. We wanted to explore new worlds, and instead discovered that some fights are worth dying for. He paused, looking around at his crew. Amy Chen was coordinating communications with rebel fleets across 3 sectors. Danny Rodriguez was still fixing things that shouldn't be fixable. Lisa Parker was preparing weapons that had already changed the course of history. Dr. Brooks was analyzing enemy positions with the determination of someone who refused to accept defeat. The Catherian Empire ruled through fear for 3,000 years, Jake continued. But fear only works when people believe they have no choice. Today, the galaxy chooses to fight, and whether we win or lose this next battle, we've already won something more important. We've proven that freedom is worth fighting for, no matter the odds. The final battle was approaching, and the entire galaxy was about to learn whether hope could triumph over 3 millennia of tyranny.